Don't like it. It's just vacuous is another word. Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to go out dressed like this. Okay, hey, Dr. H here. Okay, so I'm going to be analysing Kim Kardashian Hollywood, a game that I played the other day. It's a role-playing game where you get to play as a minor celebrity on the E-list, and you have to make your way all up to A-list celebrity. It's a free-to-play game. Before I get started, I really wanted to just address something that's been bothering me for a little while. I was quite turned off by the game. I was borderline kind of angry at it for its representational aspects and its kind of biases. And a couple of things have occurred to me since then. The first one is I stopped to think about what it was that was making me angry about the kind of the celebrity culture aspects of the game. And I think the thing that made me the most angry actually has very little to do with the game and a lot more to do with our culture and society, in which we elevate and give status to people who don't have a great deal of talent. They're not necessarily able to do anything particularly remarkable, and that bothers me, because I think if we're going to hold people up to be role models, then they ought to at least be able to do something. I mean, I don't mind holding up a sort of a footballer as a role model because they're a talented individual, but holding up someone, making them famous just for being famous, I have real problems with that. And I think some of the people that we've elevated into that status are, shall we say, poor role models, and actually they're not the sort of people that we should aspire to be. I mean, okay, if you want to aspire to their wealth and you want to aspire to their lifestyle, that's one thing, but don't aspire to be that person. Anyway, rant out of the way. The second thing that was bothering me, right throughout the game, I was going on about some of the gender politics in the game and some of the negative representations of women. I talked about them kind of groveling for the cash, and I talked about them a girl's got nothing to wear. And it occurred to me that selection screen right back at the start of the game, that I could have played male. And it occurred to me also that if I had have played male, I would have been doing largely the same sorts of things that I was doing as a female, but I would have been doing them as a male character. And that's really where I want to come in to the analysis of this game, because if you're studying it for GCSE in the UK, or even at a higher level, then I think there are really three strands to the argument. You can start off by talking about the negative representation of women. I mean, the game is called Kim Kardashian Hollywood. It directly ties into Kim Kardashian. It has a woman's name in the title. You can play as a female. I think the game is intended to be aimed more at a female market than a male market. And you can make all of the sort of typical negative representation of women arguments if you want to. So I'm going to go through just a couple of those to begin with. And then I'm going to talk about the other two strands that slightly complicate this, that you might get into if you want a slightly higher grade or more interesting argument. So the first thing is, we're going to bring in some theory. Then I think some of the theories that we could bring in here are Blumler and Katz with uses and gratifications theory. The four categories, and I'll put a frame stop up, the four categories that this normally gets broken down into are escapism, social identity or personal identity, social relationships, and surveillance. There's a fair amount of escapism in there. I can imagine, if I am, for example, a young girl playing the game, I can imagine that I am this E-list celebrity and I'm going to raise my game. I'm going to get myself up to an A-list star, just like my role model, Kim Kardashian, the person that I want to be. And I'm going to do that by screwing other people over and posting nasty things about them on social media and grabbing as much cash as I can and getting my hair done and buying ridiculous $140 dresses, and that was the cheapest one that I could afford. And I'm going to do all those things. And that is quite an escapist fantasy, because the vast majority of people do not live their life like that. And unlike watching one of the Kim Kardashian shows, where you just see her and her family doing this stuff, with a game you actually get to live that lifestyle. And that is quite an escapist fantasy. So you've got your uses and gratifications right there. Of course, there's also a certain amount of social identity going on, personal identity. We are invited to want to be this sort of character. We're invited to aspire towards this lifestyle, that you should want to be a celebrity, you should want to live in the Kim Kardashian mansion, you should want to eat at expensive restaurants and go on dates all the time and post on social media and have an agent and a publicist and all these sorts of things. Obviously, all of this is complicated by the fact that there doesn't seem to be any balance. When I did the Lara Croft Go analysis, there was some balance in the game because, as I said, the negotiated reading there, to use Stuart Hall, the negotiated reading there, somewhere in between the preferred and the oppositional reading. The negotiated reading there is that, yes, Lara Croft has a negative representational image. She looks a certain way, and she's a poor role model for young women and girls, but at the same time, she kicks a lot of ass. In this game, you don't get to kick a lot of ass. There isn't much balance. The entirety of the game is, I use the word spurious, kind of fake and phony, but I also use the word vacuous. It's quite empty goals, at least from my perspective. I didn't really feel as though what I was doing was particularly worthwhile. I didn't feel as though I was kind of saving humanity or advancing a cause. I just felt like I was kind of making myself look better on social media, and that doesn't hold a massive amount of interest for me. So that's the first strand, and again, if you're looking for your 4 or 5 grade, that's probably enough. But if you want to go a little bit further, or if you're studying this game a little bit higher, then we can complicate this, because the second strand of the argument is that it's possible to play this game as a male character. Now, as soon as I can play the game as a male character, it immediately calls into question lots of the arguments around women. Because yes, when I played through as a female character, I was talking about the negative representations that I saw. But I would have had exactly the same things happen to me if I'd have been a man. I would have been invited to parties, I would have met Kim Kardashian, I would have gone on dates, and I would have, screwed other people over, and I imagine I would have gone to my wardrobe and had to click the button several times, and in this case a guy would have had nothing to wear. So a lot of the arguments that I'm making around gender don't necessarily hold true. So I wanted to get into the third strand, which I think is perhaps the most interesting. It's possible to complicate this issue even further if you apply a concept called emphasized femininity. Now, emphasized femininity is a theory that was developed by Connell, by R.W. Connell, in 1995, and has been written about a lot since then. Emphasized femininity was developed alongside something called hegemonic masculinity. And hegemonic masculinity is the idea that there's this kind of hierarchy, this sort of pecking order within masculinity, and that those at the top get to tell everyone else what sort of men they should be. And a lot has been written about that. Not as much has been written about emphasized femininity, which is that masculinity also tells women the way that they are expected to be, and the sorts of performances of femininity that men expect. If you remember from my analysis of Lara Croft Go, we talked about Judith Butler, and we talked about how gender is a performance, and it's possible for men to act in a feminine way and for women to act in a masculine way. And what I would like to argue is that actually, even though I can play the game as a male, I'm still being invited to enact aspects that have traditionally been seen as feminine. I'm still being asked to perform emphasized femininity, a particular sanctioned kind of femininity that basically is the gold digger, the hanger-on, the person who is secondary, the person who bases their career, at least in the first instance, bases their career and their celebrity off someone else's fame, someone else's success, and they then get introduced to the right people at the right parties, and they start to make money for themselves. And this is one route through which some women have been able to lift themselves out of their circumstances and change their lifestyles under patriarchy. Because within a patriarchy there are a limited number of ways in which women can lift themselves out of their circumstances, change their circumstances, and this is definitely one of them, playing up to the masculine expectation of what they are supposed to be. So, just by way of bringing this all together, the first strand of the argument is that there's a negative representation of women. There's no balance in the representation of women in here, and I can bring in Blumler and Katz's uses and gratifications. I can talk about this being an escapist fantasy for young women and girls who aspire to be like Kim Kardashian, and I can talk about this sort of social identity, again, people who aspire to be like Kim Kardashian. The second strand of the argument is that I can then complicate that previous argument by saying, well, it's possible to play this as a man, so therefore all of the sort of assumptions that you might have about gender and about the negative representations of women, the game is balanced because men are also gold diggers, men are also have nothing to wear, men also are kind of man-whoring their way around town. And then the third strand is that I can complicate that argument even further by saying that even if I am playing the game as a man, I'm still performing emphasized femininity. I'm still performing the expected aspects of femininity that the male patriarchy would expect women to perform. Hopefully I haven't rambled my way through this analysis too much either. And do please get in touch in the comments section if you disagree with anything that I've said. As I said, emphasized femininity, not a massive amount's been written about it, and I would really like to hear what you guys think. Okay, thank you very much, and as always, happy hunting.